Hey now everybody, this is Professor Island and we are discussing critical approaches, critical perspectives, and today we're discussing cultural criticism. One of the basic tenets of using critical perspectives is the understanding that there is no single way to look at something and say this is exactly what it means, because it very often has to do with the observer, the audience for that work as to what something means. That's why art is often questioned in terms of what something is good, something's bad, something's right, something's wrong, because different people have different perspectives about what it means. Within that same context, cultural criticism is a critical perspective that essentially says that a work will be translated through the cultural values of the observer. And if you're going to apply a cultural criticism, what you would do is have to find a secondary source that discusses and explains the views, the values, and the mores of a particular cultural group, and then apply those things back to the work. For example, if you're going to analyze your favorite rap song, if it was like It Was a Good Day by Ice Cube, and you were to analyze it historically, you'd focus on the fact that he mentions all these things going on, and you'd find resources to say, yeah, this stuff went on. Not necessarily him, but just went on. However, from a cultural perspective, depending on the culture that you choose, people might find this work to be reaffirming, to be disturbing, to be irritating, or to be a manifestation of the lives that they lead. A cultural perspective, for example, of someone who lives in the inner city might find that many of the things that he discusses in an ironic tone are a reflection of the realities, the harsh realities of life at that time in South Central Los Angeles. Likewise, the cultural criticism, for example, from a culture of police officers might find much of what he discusses to be problematic. He discusses using illegal drugs, he discusses breaking laws and avoiding the police, and he even discusses the potential use of an automatic weapon, all of which might bother the law, because their culture believes that there are certain rules and we're supposed to follow these particular rules. Likewise, people who are disturbed by the glorification of gang culture as a culture might find a problem with the song because it makes it sound like the lifestyle that he's extolling is something that he's portraying it as something good. The idea is that a cultural perspective is not any individual way of looking at something. It is actually a category, and theoretically you could write an entire paper in which you examine 3, 4, 5 different cultural translations of any given work. And your responsibility would be to find secondary sources that explain and articulate what that group means. Religions are great cultural perspectives. Obviously, cultures and ethnicities themselves would be great cultures, although in many cases you have to find a subgroup in there. Particular regions of the United States, particular regions of the world create cultures that would be good. There are also cultures that are defined by the fact that people have developed a belief system, not only religions, but for example, police officers, the military, even education, the education group itself. Students are a culture because they have a belief system about what they're supposed to be doing. The idea is that you need to find these resources that help you to explain what they believe and then apply it back to the work in terms of how they would respond to it. Whether they would understand particular terminology, whether they would be offended by particular phrases and terminology or ideas, whether they would agree with opinions being expressed in the work. A cultural criticism in some ways is going to be a response in the sense that it is going to give the opinion of the culture that you have defined. It is not your opinion. Even if the culture that you've chosen is your own culture, you must remain objective and use your secondary sources and speak through them, but it is how that culture would view this particular work. Cultural criticism is a very powerful, critical perspective. You can use it in multiple ways in the same work, just choosing different cultures for each one. And for many people, it opens up the opportunity to translate something in multiple ways, especially choosing a culture that appreciates a work, and in the same paper, choosing a culture that does not appreciate the work at all. Okay. Do your research, and you will find that this is a very useful tool in analyzing work. Stay in touch.